All right. So today we're going to share the dark mode design direction that Jeremy and Sasha have been working through for the majority of Q2 and earlier. We're close to the final stages of this phase of the dark mode project. And yeah, like Jeremy was saying, we want to share with design leadership to get alignment on our thinking as well as just what the outcomes look like here, really before we start to spread out and communicate the dark mode experience and direction with the rest of the organization. And with that, Jeremy and Sasha, you two are up here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so as Chris said, Jeremy Elder, staff product designer on the Foundations team, and Sasha, he'll jump in too. So,
Yeah, I'm a staff designer on the UX paper cuts team.
perfect. And on that note, this is one of our first deeper collaborations with Foundations and paper cuts, and it's been it's kind of a dream scenario just because of the surface area that we can cover. So let's see here. All right, I've got the presentation up. Let me know if you have any troubles seeing that. We're giving Figma slides kind of a first go, and that way we can work through some of the prototypes and keep in context and whatnot. So here we are, dark mode design direction. We're specifically focused on direction and not decisions. And so this is very fluid. It's very, this is where we're leaning towards, and we want to hone in on some of the principles and some of the thinking behind it. And then, as you'll see in next steps, try to transition that into some decisions that we can make more tactical. So let's see if we'll get this to move forward. Of course, does not want to move forward. There we go. All right, so this is just like a snapshot of some of the highlights, if you will, of things that we've been exploring, and really the only kind of eye candy piece that we put in here. It would be great when we roll this out to a larger audience to do a little more promotion of it, if you will, and kind of emphasize some of the changes and highlight that. I think it'll be really valuable to get a lot of energy around the effort. There's a lot of passion around dark mode, and I think when people see it and they see the ability to have that in their parts of the product, it's going to inspire them to want to help contribute to migrations or other efforts that they're going to be needed to make sure that we touch every corner of GitLab to have full coverage with it. And that's really what's going to help us get it from a beta to a GA status, is making sure we have kind of an optimal coverage in the product. So it'd be awesome to be able to do that. So as far as just a light agenda to work through is just talk about current state, talk about current state of our process here, reasons and principles, like what we're mentally kind of applying to this. We'll look at some components and surfaces, some of the different concepts that we're thinking through, show some page comparisons. Sasha has a fantastic prototype to walk through that kind of gives you a sense of what it might be like to actually use the dark mode experience, and then talk about some next steps. So current state, we've been doing for over the last several months, design exploration and pairing. We started with some research that Dan helped lead with just determining where people's minds were at with dark mode. So what are they thinking? What do they like? What don't they like about it? And this is just in general, just any experience. It can be GitLab, it can be Spotify, it can be anything. And so we kind of rounded out that feedback and took that as a little bit of a categorization and jumping off points for our exploration, and things we wanted to keep in mind or steer clear of, and things we wanted to embrace. We've been focused on direction versus decisions, and so a lot of that has been kind of a double diamond process where we get in and we narrow down on, okay, these things work. Now let's expand out and see how they look in the rest of the UI. Okay, this is, et cetera, et cetera. You understand that process, so I don't have to go into that. And these are just some visuals of, just some of the frame sprawl from Figma that we've had. So, and then we've also been just keeping token work in mind as we've been going through this. We're trying to be tethered to that, but not fully limited to that. And so by the way, I don't have chat pulled up, so if anything comes up, feel free to just jump in and interrupt me. So
I have to step away just for those few minutes that I mentioned.
okay.
Okay, I'll be back in a few moments if you want to pause the recording. Thank you, sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, so just a recap on current state. We've been doing a lot of design exploration and pairing between Sasha and I and Dan and a few others, focusing on direction versus decisions. So this has enabled us to really think big picture, but then understand what the larger impact might be to the product. And then also keeping token work in mind so that all this awesome work that we're doing on tokens to enable a better dark mode is not inhibited by any of our design decisions. So a few reasons for dark mode. Some of these are table stakes, just visual preference. We know it's a top requested feature in the product, and I'm sure in many other products. It does benefit users with visual impairments. We have a course that's coming out. So this is kind of a teaser, but somebody using like screen zoom to read a display with dark mode. It's awesome how much dark mode can really be a benefit for users. So that is a massive highlight. I don't want to downplay it by calling it a table stake, but it's something that we should kind of expect to have. Next is just having continuity with your system preferences and other tools. So we know a lot of developer workflows are dark mode, and these are places that individuals work in throughout their whole day. And so the ability to not have that context switch be glaring or feel incongruous is something that we want to address. But I think the real kicker for me is because we know that working on dark mode has the potential to make the experience better for just any user in any mode. The principles and the things that we're able to apply here are things that we can carry forth in the rest of the UI in kind of an iterative, cyclical fashion, getting back to even light UI. There's many things that Sasha and I have bookmarked and put on the shelf as like, we want to bring these concepts back to our light UI because we know it's going to make it better. And lastly, just kind of higher level reason would be enhancement, guidance, and cohesion. One of the things that Sasha and I have experienced as we've looked at larger page flows is that we are really enhancing the content, we're enhancing the guidance and the visual hierarchy, and we're also bringing more cohesion into different UI elements that right now feel like they're just unrelated. So historically, it's been a bootstrap based UI as far back as I'm aware. And we've slowly been working on filtering that out and uh, getting into something that's a little more proprietary and ownable. And part of that with the bootstrap or just other UIs, it's just there's so many options that you can have things just that feel very unconnected at times, or decisions can branch off. And so we're trying to really bring those things back. Few principles that we've been using. There's more in pajamas that relate to both light mode and just light and dark in general, but the one specifically for dark mode would be that forward things are lighter, receding ones are darker. So kind of just following the way that light works. Uh, we're leveraging brightness, which is a stronger indicator of depth than shadows or borders, where we're not afforded the ability to have depth play as much of a part just with shadow and light play because there's less of it as it might in light UI. One of the things that we also noticed was that the color stands out more in dark UI. So less of it is really needed to convey the same meaning or draw the same amount of attention as in light UI. There's just less light and color being cast from your screen. So when there is some of that, it stands out more. So we have the opportunity to really clean up the UI. And then as far as the surfaces, like everything sits on, our principles are that it's just top lit by a single pure white light source. So we're not doing anything funky with directions or glowing. Objects naturally reflect light. They don't emit it or glow. So it feels like a user interface. We're not trying to emulate anything that you might find purely like in nature or whatnot. Like we're still focused on the fact that this is UI. It's made of dark materials and text uses lighter colors. And some elements are just going to feel dimmed while others feel inverted. So a lot of initial design efforts to switch from light to dark, we'll just simply try to invert things, and that's just like an incorrect way to do it. We look at it more like we're dimming the lights, if you will. And so because of that, as that process happens, some things are going to feel dimmed and others are going to need to feel inverted to account for that. So, all right, some component examples. And feel free to, I know I'm talking fast. I want to be able to have time for any kind of questions and conversation. But feel free to jump in with any, feel free to interject. So we wanted to kind of walk through component examples as they look today in light mode, as they look in alpha, and as they look in what we're calling our beta or concept. This is just a collection of various UI elements. And I like to do like a squint test on each of these slides just to see like what is standing out, what is competing, what's fighting. In this one, the messaging, toast and tooltips and the danger buttons and labels and the large sign-in buttons, those all stand out, and rightfully so. But I think we can do better. In alpha, let's see here. So in alpha, we see a little bit of a stronger emphasis on different elements now. So in light mode, the alerts were a little more, apologize, it's not let me click in that frame. There we go. In light mode, alerts are more downplayed. In alpha, they're stronger and they're covered with kind of a larger coverage of just a darker saturated color. See that like the confidential task note. The buttons still stand out quite a bit, as well as labels, but other elements are starting to recede and compete a little more. And as we move to our concept, we've shifted that where things that you've intentionally interacted with and feedback are coming more forward. So this would be like your tooltips, your toast, drop downs, things that should be layered and actually coming forward are buttons are using darker text to have more contrast and not be as garish, if you will. And because of that, we're able to do a little bit of a desaturated button, but a little brighter. But it doesn't feel as strong as it might with the light mode and readability of that light text on that background. So I'm just going to switch back and forth a few times on these.
And so this may be like just kind of, and this is a very newbie question, but the alpha experience, that's been our experimental dark mode, yeah? And then the concept is our like the dark mode with the proper token implementation. Just kind of curious about like how was alpha implemented? Like what was sort of how have we been able to do this without tokens?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So a lot of the things in the current state is just like inverting colors, or we just mapping like one color to another, like one value to the other one. But we felt like having any design decisions in mind. It's just like, we're mapping like A to B. Usually we're just inverting wherever possible, like white gets black, black gets white, stuff like that. So it's like also from a technical point of view, not really in a maintainable state. And that's also why it's labeled as alpha, and we do not officially support it because of that reason, right? Because of like the lack of the actual design and design token part for alpha. That's like the current state we have.
So it's JavaScript then that's doing the inversion?
No, we're actually generating CSS files. So that's all handled. So JavaScript is not involved, but we're basically just like writing a file, and then we just map all the color values, saying like, and then shipping that file like, hey, okay, this is dark mode. So that's like the like the technical depth behind it and how it works is just not feasible to actually maintain, because it can lead to a ton of problems. Like we have like problems with accessibility, with readability, because like weak contrasts and all of that, right? Because we're just we're just from a machine point of view, we're just like rewriting the whole file, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thinking about it. So
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, alpha is something that we wanted to participate more in as a team, but just couldn't support it. And so some of the things to highlight here would, and this goes back a little while, Angela, but we've been working on kind of the concept of unboxing and beautification, and part of that has to do, or a lot of that has to do with the borders and the way we're approaching borders. And in light mode, we're using borders quite a bit, which I think is appropriate for light mode because we're with so much light. It's an element that allows your eye to kind of grab onto and be a stopper. With alpha, though, borders become competitive with some of the content, and they just can add. I didn't think I would say it on this call, but visual noise. I try not to use that too much, right? But I think they can add visual noise. And then with the concept, we really want those borders to be downplayed. So we're using more of this knockout effect, and we'll get into that a little more. But rather than trying to say, here's the boundary of everything, let's actually use some different tints and things to have boundaries, and let's use borders in a little more elegant way to still be separators, but to not compete with content. I think oftentimes with buttons in particular, a stronger border, and don't mind these hover states here. These are components that are being pulled from the current UI kit, but borders can compete with that text and fight with it a little bit. And so we want to avoid that and prevent that. I wanted to really highlight too that we are, as part of this process, historically trying to correct some of our component alignment where labels and badges have felt pretty similar. We're hoping to do some things that make them feel a little more distinct in the UI. Sasha can maybe talk a little bit more about that later with some of the other screens that we show. The popovers and toast and tooltip, these are all like feedback elements, but they're all treated very differently. And so there's an opportunity to have a little bit more cohesion there. And then another fun one is our inputs and our default buttons. They both have borders. They're often paired together, but the button itself has a lighter border. The reason for that goes back to accessibility reasons. But one of the things that we're able to do in this dark mode is actually differentiate these components. So the two things at play, we're able to do more differentiation where we want to, and we're able to do more cohesion where we want to. And so that's really going to help us shape some of these things. And these are some of the thoughts that we would like to bring back into the current light mode eventually. So surface concepts. Today, our UI is relying on just colors and borders and some shadows, but it's not, there's no system or methodology to it as far as we've been able to extract. And that's made some of the token work actually pretty complex because we're like, well, this thing it's it's emphasized, but it's got this color, like, a table header might be light gray to emphasize it, but then in a different scenario, the content of a container is light gray. And so we've just got these different mindsets happening, and we're working on, this is a concept that Dan put together, but working on being able to have our surface concepts and our depth concepts work together and actually bring that into like a system approach that we can take back to light mode. So there's, on a single plane, there's contained things, there's subtle things, there's strong things. And then at a depth level, there's just different proximities or things that we want to emphasize because they're actually, you're interacting with them. So, a tooltip, a toast might be in the higher depth where maybe something like a modal or a drawer, we might keep more receding because we can still build on that layer, for example. All right, so go into a little more comparisons. And if you'd like to, Angela, I shared the presentation with you, and I can give you control to go ahead and interact with any of these prototypes as well if you'd like, but don't feel any pressure to. Same with you, Sasha, or Chris, if you want, I can give you control at any point. All right, so first comparison, again, looking at light, alpha, and concept. This is a policies page. This was an actual screenshot. So this was actually how it appeared for me, where there's a banner and 3 different alerts. One of them is a danger alert, which is at the bottom. I didn't alter any of the spacing or any other aspects of this. It's just a straight up screenshot. Took the same for alpha. And we could see now how hierarchy changes, but also we're flooded with these areas of these saturated color that just feel less intentional, and they're competing. We already know that alerts and multiple alerts and notices, we know that that's a problem and we're addressing that. But there's ways that I feel like we can downplay that and not make it such a jarring experience. Sasha highlighted how even when you're onboarding, if you were onboarding to GitLab and just as a product, and you switch to using dark mode today, right away, you would have tons of these experiences where you're going to run into all these different color blocks and not really ever get to the content. So our goal is not to downplay the alerts and whatnot, but we want them to feel integrated and meaningful and contextual. So this is just a very light treatment where we're using color much more minimally, but in a way that is not going to feel so garish and strong. There are a few other qualities here that are out of scope, that is like shadows on alerts or maybe border radius that we want to explore, but purely from a color change, we're reducing that, we're making it feel more integrated, but we're highlighting it in other ways, like the headings and using similar colors for text, and icon, etc.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I mean, I think Jeremy already, they put it on the surface already. We already know that, like, looking at the screen, like looking at spacing between elements, we have more spacing between like the different messages you see on screen than to the next element, and also like potentially showing 3+ messages might be like a different issue we have to address. So these are all out of scope of the work we're doing, right? But we're actually took notes that these are things we can also look into, and these are things that Papercut seem is like a pretty good place to look into these and trying to solve these issues. So just as a side note.
Yeah. Click to the next one, and Sasha, if you don't mind, I'm gonna spotlight you to walk through a few of these too, because I think that you will be able to call out some different details that I don't want to be the only one talking here, because you've done a massive amount of work here. So
yeah, so
let me
this
know
is
if you're able
another
to.
example where we just want to show like different components stacked on each other. This is basically what you see, or is like part of what you're seeing when you're on the product page. You're on the repo page, like the default page you're seeing going into a product and a project, sorry. And in light mode, we have like some differentiation between, for example, like the last commit and then the table which follows. But then if we switch over to alpha, we actually lose a lot of those, like of this context, right? Because you're greeted with a lot of borders, especially we're using like outlines for the top element, and then we use outlines for like the input field, and it's just very hard to distinguish like each different component from each other. And then when we apply like those new design principles, you actually can see that it's way easier to actually like make the switch between, okay, what is like a component, where does it start, where does it end, what does it contain, and also like the actual readability of content, and also like what is a button, like what are the different elements, what is the differentiation between them, is way more given when we apply like the principles Jeremy talked through, right? Another example, and I think this shows another nuance to it. So if we look at the components we're using for threads or comments, like in the activity feed, for example, we have a bit of a lack of hierarchy in this component, right? especially if you look at it, like in alpha, you can see that especially like this collapse replies stands out more because it uses a darker color, while as like the initial comment and the replies use the same surface, right? And applying our principles and also like reducing the elements, we can actually make a more meaningful UI because we use like a higher surface for the initial comment, and then we use the same surface for all the replies, right? This creates like a natural hierarchy while still reducing and also like unboxing those elements, right? So like the visual complexity is less than what we had before, and we can actually guide the user towards like what is the important information, like okay, all those replies are actually related to the initial comment, right? So that's another example where we can actually see where like these concepts axle, where we just like have a huge lag in current alpha. But does it also apply to light mode, right? I think that's one point Jeremy made. Like those principles, we try to apply them now for dark mode, but later we want to bring them back to light mode as well. And in this example, you will see that in light mode, it works pretty well. Like input elements like those selects, they work great. They stand out enough against the background. The unprotect button, the danger button looks okay. It's a secondary, so it uses the outlines. But then if we switch to alpha, you can already see like multiple problems. It's very hard to actually see, like these elements. We use a ton of borders in this element, right? Like this is an outline border, which is contained in an outline header. And then, like each row uses a border, and the color of the unprotect, the red against the gray, can also lead to potentially like readability issues because like the contrast is really not that great, especially that those two colors do not go that well. And then in the concept, we can see we're basically like unboxing this table layout in this component and using like these breakthrough borders, which are actually just using like the background color, to divide like each row. And then like the elements on top of it actually are way more distinguishable than before in the current alpha. So it's way closer to what we have in light mode in terms of the principles. And also getting away of like all those borders on all those elements makes just, like gets away of a lot of complexity. So the user can actually look at the actual content and isn't like, like distracted by the complexity, the visual complexity of the component. Sorry, Jeremy, do you want to add something as well here?
The only comment I have is that I want to be careful that we're not like ripping on the current alpha experience, right? Like that's done a lot of good for a lot of users. So I want to highlight that that's actually been a really important and valuable stepping stone that's allowed us to see like how certain things like inversion and whatnot may or may not work, but also it's given us a jumping off point to say what can we improve upon and what can we do differently? How can tokens be more meaningful where they don't just invert or we're not remapping things in different ways? So I think that a lot of credit goes to those who have built and maintained and updated alpha because it's allowed us to to build upon some of those concepts. So
yeah, that's a great input. I didn't want to that it sounds like we're ripping off alpha. It was just like some comparison. So I think that's a great addition and a very valid comment. Thank you. All right. I just prepared like a small prototype that we have more of a look and feel when we're just navigating through the UI a bit. So you get a bit more of a glimpse of like how this potentially can feel with like those principles applied. So we're on the login screen here, nothing too fancy. We can fill out the like the login form and sign in. Then we're greeted by like a message here, welcome to the new dark mode. We can close this. We can see that the search stands out a bit. We have the sidebar navigation. We have some hover states. I can click on I'm now on the group level. I can now click on this project, go to the project page. And I think here, if I switch between alpha and concept, you can see some of the principles applied. Like in current alpha, like the like we have a lot of elements which actually do require a lot of attention, right? And labels are one of them. Even though they might be secondary information, they're popping quite a bit. That's what Jerry meant with like how we implemented those things in the current UI. They just have like too much attention while they potentially shouldn't have it. So we actually inverted the importance of batches and labels because batches actually were more subtle before. Now they're more important. So we actually switch basically like the importance of batches and labels as one example. We already talked about like these elements in the middle here. They're also like standing out, right? This is like the information which is potentially the most important one. Also to navigate through like a repository, getting to your information about the project, like sub information, issues, merge requests, and what you can do. And then the site information, the meta information is actually a bit more subtle on the right side. So if you go to issues, this is just, like a normal list of things. We could click on an issue. We'll see that the widgets we're using here, like to connect like linked items or child items or related merge requests stand out a bit. They all are contained as it's, like distinguishable. And then we have some comments here. I already talked through like the principles. We can quickly add a comment here. Then a comment gets added and we can actually see the separation between them, but they're both on the same surface level, right? Because like they're related to the OP message here. If we move on, here we can do another switch. See the current implementation or like the current state we're having. And I think that this screen actually shows that the information sometimes can scream at you. Like everything seems to be of importance here because like the pipeline status has quite an importance, like visually speaking, labels and so on. And then when we actually apply those principles, we can, like get away of some of the importance for labels, and then we can actually opt for making like the merge request pipeline widget a bit more of an importance, like that it stands out more, because that's like a related information which is important in this case. We also have some popovers here where you can see, which would be like a 1-up level surface, and then we have like tooltips. We also have like drop downs here, and then we can click on a job, and then we actually land on the job page. And I think like this is where you see the biggest change or the biggest departure when it comes to this like visual hierarchy we can build, because here like everything uses like the same like text color. Everything seems to be important, but the actual job log in the middle is potentially the most subtle one, and also like the status of the pipeline or of this job, the failed status seems not of that important. And then if we switch over to our concept, you can actually see that the status gets more emphasizes a lot more, and also you can see that the job log is now contained in a surface, so we can actually, like level it up, make sure that it has like the attention we want to give it, so actually users can distinguish between what is the job log, what are like meta information or like additional information to this job and stuff like that.
You go back to alpha on that real quick. Switch
Of
between.
course.
So the other deal too is just the calls to action and how they in the concept it's a subtle difference for this, but they stand out more. Like you can squint and you can see like I'm supposed to retry this. It's more important than adding an issue. So there's just some better distinguishing happening.
And all the effort that you're doing around like shifting kind of hierarchical focus, that's all being addressed, that's all being treated by way of the tokens themselves, or is there more custom work that's needed to bring about those shifts?
I think it's
Yeah,
go ahead, Sasha. I think it's primarily tokens. There are some other things that we know we want to address with, like in the future, like spacing, or one of the things with dark mode is because, like with light bleed, you have white text, it feels heavier. So it can feel stronger. Like we want to be able to address that by, even having a token that adjusts the font weight potentially on some of these stronger elements. So all that to say, like, yes, tokens are doing a lot of this. Some of the layout, like the buttons shifting to one side or the other, those would be like nice to haves later, or like, paper cut like issues.
Right.
But I think most of this is driven by tokenization and the ability to change color. And that's an important point, because when we talk about dark mode, or we talk about, I should have noted this earlier, that we're trying to strike a good middle ground on what we have for dark mode, so that if some people are like, this is too much contrast, we have room via tokens to shift it to maybe a more dimmed dark mode, or an enhanced contrast one, Windows high contrast mode. Like we have this nice middle ground to be able to shift in those directions based on the ability to simply just change tokens. So
yeah.
Sasha, do you have anything to add on that? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I think that sums it up, right? Some of the things you see here, like we moved the buttons a bit. I mean, these would be potentially just paper cuts. I mean, these can already be done today. Some of them, spoiler alert, are already done on my local, and I'm about to create some merge requests. But that's always like, if I work on some things and I see potential, I'm just trying to like move on with them. But like the majority of changes you see, like Jeremy said, is like correlate with like the implementation of design tokens. Yeah,
that's amazing, really good.
There's probably going to be some things that we have to change with maybe some of the underlying structure. We've noted that early on with buttons, for example, that use box shadow, where we've been transitioning to use border, for example, so we could take advantage of that. Some of these other containers and whatnot will probably have to do similar, but again, it is more paper cuts things to align it, and it's things we would have to probably do anyways to see the advantage of tokens in the future. So
yeah, there were some things we just like identified, which are pretty much out of scope for this, but like the thing Jeremy mentioned with like the box shadow. So historically speaking, we use or we have some components which actually use box shadow as a replacement for an actual border, just like technically speaking on the like on the HTML element. And that actually leads to issues, because like how, for example, high contrast mode works is if you have like a border, it actually replaces that automatically to increase contrast. While as box shadow just gets ignored, right? Box shadow is not part of high contrast. So if we use box shadow as borders in high contrast, you will lose like the actual context, because you can not see on input fields, for example, if you use box shadow, you cannot see that it's an input field because the border is missing. And we push for some updates to actually address those. But these are just like overrides we're shipping. And when we go basically like one step back and we fix the actual components firsthand, we can get rid of those overrides. And then once they're tokenized, they should work in all scenarios, like light mode, dark mode, high contrast, and everything which will be like beyond that.
Okay.
I want to call out that we've got 10 minutes left in the meeting time. So I think we want to wrap up and handle any other questions. Now would be a great time for that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've been keeping track of my questions so as not to interrupt too much. Okay, now's a good time. So I mean, first of all, like it's really great. Nice work. Like the improvement is massive. I am super pro dark mode, so like everything that I can possibly make dark, I do on my screen. I use dark reader in like all sorts of random places and and just deal with it, just because my eyes are sensitive and yeah. And so I've been using our dark mode, and so I appreciate like a lot of the concept stuff that you just showed today, like really like the more muted colors are such a relief, like to see that, right? And yeah, just it looks way more polished, more professional. I think it really in aggregate, like as you like work with the product, like I know, and we're looking at this in like very spot treat sort of ways today, but I think just walk away sort of whether it's sort of realized or not, you're going to walk away from the GitLab experience and it's going to feel like a higher sort of just a higher end product, right? Like I think it all adds up and really has a big brand effect, right? And I think I would expect that we'll to see how it goes, but we should keep an eye on like our satisfaction scores. We should keep an eye on how it addresses like people's concerns around whatever people are saying today around accessibility and or yeah, just sort of if people are missing things that today aren't like prominent and we're making them prominent, it's going to be interesting, I think, to look at like maybe just think about like some key metrics, right? Like where we're making significant changes that are going to like, because what you're doing is you're thinking about like the hierarchy of the page and where we want to guide people's eye, right? Like how we want them to interact with the page. And so I think that could actually have like a really big impact that could potentially be measured. I don't know like about the instrumentation exactly, but it's just something to think about, right? To just prove the value of the work here. And if we, and I guess, so I guess that's some commentary. And then I have some questions. Yeah, curious about like the rollout strategy and like when it would actually get to complete rollout.
I know we don't have Jeff on the call for some of our scheduling. I foresee in our planning, what we know today is that there's definitely more token work to happen before we could even see this enabled, and so there's a lot of components that still need tokenized or parts of the product. I have a suspicion that if we were to like flip a switch, it would help us uncover a lot of the gaps, if you will, where these tokens aren't reaching. We have to work on not redoing, but revamping the UI kit to support designers with this, or to support, the componentry in there. I know that Dan and Katie have been, and myself have started that work where we're tokenizing those through the beta. So we still have a lot of, I think, technical ground to cover before we could see it realized. But while that is taking place, I think what could happen is actually going in and defining, okay, these are how buttons are going to look in dark mode. This is how these components, we've just done a subset so we could do our due diligence to now, okay, we've got this direction. How is this going to work for the rest of these things? How are we going to address containers versus just lists and tables, and start to work through of those fine-tune details.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Chris or Sasha, but that's what I foresee like next steps being.
Yeah, I'd say the goal for the year was a GA release by the end of this fiscal year. I think the big question is what's the difference between beta and GA, and what sort of involvement and support we need from the other product teams.
Yeah.
There's a limit to what Papercuts can do to support the rest of the product. We're committed to implementing this basically across the design system, but in all the corners of products that are not quite using the design system yet, I think that is or not fully utilizing the design system. I think that's the big question. We're going to need teams to participate in this exercise, both in the rollout of tokens and then also the implementation of dark mode. So I think that's kind of the big open question for us right now.
Okay. Well, maybe we can have a deeper dive session with Jeff to understand like the dependency on teams so that I can help like push on that.
I think that would be a fantastic way to support this.
Okay. So yeah, maybe Chris, if you want to help organize that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I'll connect with Jeff. I know a big part of it will be part of a big part of this is the tokens implementation. And so I think tying these two things together will be very helpful.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh yeah, well, one of the things I want to highlight too, Angela, is that we really want to focus on some of the process around this to support the effort. So we don't know today, is UXR going to test things in dark mode? Are designers going to use dark mode? How are they going to validate? What are we doing for visual regression testing, for QA? There's a lot of process pieces that haven't been defined. We do have a placeholder epic to track that work, but those are things that will need more leadership guidance on to understand like what is the expectation for these different roles and how they leverage something like this.
Yeah, everything you just said, let's put that in that agenda with Jeff. That all seems relevant, like things we need to track as sort of PM UX leadership team. What about the default? Like, sounds like I can already kind of see where this is headed. Like that would be our recommendation, is to have GitLab be default dark mode.
I think the recommendation would be system, align with your system preferences.
Yep.
And so like my system's set to dark, so I would expect it to be dark. And yeah.
Yeah, that will also be my expectation. And then you still have like the user preferences where you can, like force light or dark modes.
Yeah.
But like the fallback would be system. So the system decides if you want to see it in light or dark. There's also like how many other tools operate, but still giving like users the choice that they can actually opt in or out manually.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Is this going to address like scaling, like zooming in like text size?
No, that would be out of scope for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then yeah, this is a question that's a little bit outside the scope of what you've just shown. But generally, like I'm really excited about just the branding potential around all this, and it's strengthening our brand and just making us look more professional, more competitive and modern. And I think that's all
enterprise.
That's right. And I want to say this in the right way. I want to be able to capture your vision as well for like what I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you to bring this forward. It's really compelling. But I also want to understand like we're like beyond this, because I imagine you're constrained in certain ways with what you're doing, and you probably have a lot of ideas as you work on this for like what you could do next. And so I'm very interested as well to understand like what's sort of your like vision even beyond this, so that we can already start to anticipate that or sort of set that up and sort of foreshadow that with whomever we need to, or just so yeah, just kind of curious, like I guess to put that into a proper question, what do you see as like next steps beyond pushing out the concepts. Like, how do we become even more leading with
Yeah.
our visual design?
Love the question, and we have thought about it. So uh,
Naturally.
yeah, so what I've been thinking a lot about is the role of visual design in design systems, and systems that I think are very successful, like IBM or Wise, they have a codified design language that the design system is translating into the product. I feel like we have, just to be candid, I feel like we have a gap between our brand and our marketing design language and our product.
Yeah.
And historically, a lot of that just comes down to something simple like color. Uh, for tone of voice, things like that, spacing, like, okay, those are all separate, right? Those are all, they have their space. But when it comes down to color and brand infusion into the product, we haven't done that. And historically, color is the deal. We use color so much for meaning in the product, for everything from buttons to pipelines to status, etc., that trying to bring in brand colors to that has been problematic. And that's where my holdout has been with theming as well, is that okay, we're using red so much to denote negative actions and whatnot. If we say, well, we can make your theme green, and we want it to change buttons, well, all of a sudden, are these success buttons? Like, what does that mean? So where I foresee us going, especially with tokenization and some of this thought, is having developing a stronger relationship with the design language of the product and figuring out how we can translate that better into the product to reflect the brand. And I think a lot of that is going to be color reduction, so that we say, okay, we're going to use, I'm just throwing this out there, like we're going to use purple for all our interactive elements. And then,
Yeah.
you know what, now we can say, okay, the company A, your color is I don't know, green. I'm trying to think of something that is accessible, not orange or something, right? Like, and so now all these elements you can theme to your instance, and it can have more meaning at an instance level.
Yeah.
That's where I foresee it going, is being able to be smarter with our use of some of these visual attributes that initially carry through the brand and make it feel more proprietary and ownable, so that it feels like GitLab, but then translating that and pushing it downstream to end users who might want to make their instance level feel more like them.
Yeah.
And in that way, being able to do that so that we can just not have those competing elements.
Has
So,
there
so
been
that's where, okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Has there been a demand to like be able to white label our product? Like, do people want to brand it according to their company?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because Jeremy and I just had this discussion yesterday. We were just discussing because I already know from other open source communities which actually use GitLab. I'm also part of some of them, and there were requests, and there still are requests of like better visually integrating GitLab into their corporate identity. Some just use CSS overrides in doing so on top of what we provide, which potentially lead to UI issues once we ship updates. It's an okay approach for now for them, but they actually wish that they could integrate better with their branding and so on. So I think there is opportunity for this. It could also be like a selling point that you can actually, like integrate this better visually into your system of tools you're using. So yeah, not a top priority, I think, in terms of like providing like a white label solution. But I think like if we get like all those principles right, like the groundwork Jeremy was just talking about, this would be just an easy next step to actually, like enable customers doing that. So.
Okay. Just realized I'm keeping you all over, and I don't know about you, but I've got another meeting I gotta jump to. This has
That's all
been,
right. I do.
thank you.
Yeah, I do want to highlight one thing that we didn't talk about really quick, and maybe we can do this in a follow-up, Chris, with Jeff, is how we're going to capture feedback. Historically, our feedback issues haven't been very helpful, and with a visual change, we know that, like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's going to be loud reactions in a negative way that we need to be prepared to handle. That just comes with the territory of visual changes. And so I
Yeah.
want to be prepared to do that in a responsible way so that we don't allow that to kind of deflate the effort, but also that we have reasons behind this, that it's backing and it's not subjective. So
Hmm. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about the potential backlash, like what we would anticipate the concerns being.
yeah, do you like in a follow-up, or I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, I'm supposed to meet with David right now, so I probably shouldn't keep him too long.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I think we can tackle it more in a follow-up, but
Okay.
I think a lot of it's just going to do with like color and contrast. It's very subjective things, but we
Okay.
want to be able to supply answers that are like here's our objective reasoning for doing this. Here are the reasons why we made this decision. So
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Cool.
some of that we can do with blog posts or preliminary things, documentation where we can point people to and be like, oh yeah, that's a great point. Here's why we made this decision.
I told David I'm running over because I'm with you all reviewing dark mode. He was very excited to know that we were having this meeting today. And he says, he says, take your time. It's all I want from UX for Christmas and my birthday this year.
Oh.
All right. Well, let's maybe plan to dig on those details, sort of when we next chat, Jeremy, I want to be able to support you there and sort of back you up with any potential arguments or, defensive rationales.
Okay. I think we'll be able to do that as we translate direction into decisions. We'll be able to document those decisions and have some of that. So,
Mhm.
and then next steps for this and direction, like what is it, we still have plenty of exploration and work to do. So is it just like keep going the course, or is it like, well, let's pause and do this, or what do you feel like is the current next step in that regard?
Say there's plenty of exploration and work to do. You mean to carry this work forward or like other distractions?
No, I think it related to dark mode in particular. So understanding like, okay, now if we got this direction, let's make sure that all these decisions align with the token work and are doable. Let's make sure
Yeah.
that we're buttoned up on, the difference between lists and tables and things like that,
Right.
taking it into the rest of the components.
Okay. It kind of sounds like a question about like rollout strategy. If I'm interpreting that correctly, like how do we want to like kind of chunk this work like in the effort to ship it? Is that kind of what's
Uh,
being question?
I think it's, I guess what I'm asking is like, do you approve of the direction and should we
Yes.
keep going this direction?
Yes.
I should just be more cut to the chase.
Unequivocally, yes. It's awesome.
That's my Midwest
Stay the course.
question. Yeah. Okay.
I think we have
Yeah.
a lot of rollout strategy conversations, both with tokens and dark mode, that need to happen over probably the next few months, really. And so we'll have to
also like
work together on how to have those conversations with the rest of the company.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
also
I'm looking
like
forward to that follow-up. Sorry.
If this is like the direction we're agreeing on, like going forward, would one of the next steps be that we also present this in a bigger audience, for example, in like in the UX circle, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah.
Maybe also yours, Jeremy.
I mean, why not the product division meeting? I mean, this presentation is amazing. I mean, it's a little bit long form for that particular forum, but I think you could adapt it and I think it would get a lot of people excited. And, if there were like asks that we had, like maybe we think about that in advance to that meeting to say this is where we need support. And this is, so maybe we have a meeting with Jeff and then we kind of strategize for that presentation. But I think it
That
should
is
be
the intention. This is supposed to be sort of our dry run of communication about this, and then the next big communication is at the product division meeting.
Beautiful.
Yeah, also that we can, like that nobody feels like left in the dark, pun intended. Like that we can actually get this out and saying like, okay, this is like a design direction or like a concept, and it's just like the starting point of the actual design work, and we need, I don't know, would love to hear like your feedback and stuff like that, right? because
Yeah.
now we were cooking behind the scenes something, and
Mhm.
potentially, like most of the designers never saw this work,
Okay.
and there might be a lot of opinions as well. I think like that's also
Mhm.
something we somehow have
Yeah.
to take into consideration.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess to just, so I guess I'm gonna try to turn that into a question. Sounds like there's a little bit about like what should our narrative be? Like how do we sort of sell this? And I think I mean you guys are very eloquent when you talk about all this, and it's delightful to just sit and listen to as a designer. But I think if I'm thinking about like the audience that is the product division and beyond, right, and like the marketing team, and they're going to be interested as well. And I think it I don't yeah, it probably makes sense to just think about like how we want to link our rationale to like more of like a brand story that propels the whole GitLab sort of value proposition, right? So where we can connect our decisions to that, like how it promotes the brand, I think will be helpful for us, right? And then as well, I know like Sid is really keen about our competitive story, right? And so like how does this sit in reference to our key competitors, right? In what ways is it potentially differentiated or better, right? And so I think, yeah, those would be some nice little ads that I think will sort of lock it in with a broader audience. Do you all have the right contacts in the brand team? Do you know, because I can be helpful there if not. Okay.
Yeah, I chat with them at some level weekly on something. So absolutely.
Okay. Okay, good. So you guys are connected in that case. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to connect with them. I don't know where the meeting went. I was going to talk to their brand leader. But what is, but like, I really like on top of my list when I have that meeting, it's like, what's your plans for like evolving our brand, right? Like, are there any plans?
Yeah. It's that I don't know. I think that's one of this is getting kind of abstract, but as I think about design system and roles, like one of the roles I foresee in the future is more of that connection between the brand and the design system.
Mhm.
And so I would like to pick Adam's brain about like, we know that there are certain design language things that you've kind of codified for marketing
Mhm.
usage. What can we start to, how should we be thinking about this as a system moving forward? Like not, if we're not flipping a switch today, but how can we make this more of a higher level design language that gets adopted in these different ways, and have that connection to ensure like we're translating it in the right way in the right places in the product, the right touch points.
Mhm.
It goes out to email, it goes out to other things. Like
Yeah.
there's so many things that I feel like we could add more cohesion to. So it would
Mhm.
be great to have that kind of a conversation.
I agreed. Yes. Okay. That's